Nancy Cordes good enough to join me now. And Nancy, quite simply, another win here for Bernie Sanders. But how did it come so convincingly?
He put together the coalition that he usually does. He won a lot of progressive voters, most of the young voters, 8 in 10 of them. And there are a lot of young voters in Wisconsin. It's a big college state. But he also won men by more than 20 points. He tied among women. So he won, and he won big. And it's pretty telling that the way that the Clinton campaign is consoling itself this morning is by saying, well, yes, she lost, but she didn't lose by as much as she lost to President Obama 8 years ago in Wisconsin.
Tough to invoke,
right,
to be sure. Meanwhile, looking at the independents, almost 70% of them who voted went for Sanders. But
right,
all the big states now coming up, perhaps a time to get well for Secretary Clinton, closed primaries. What will it mean?
Right. So Wisconsin was an open primary where you don't have to be a registered Democrat to vote in the Democratic primary. And that was a big boost for Sanders because he always does well with independent voters. People who consider themselves Democrats tend to be true blue to the candidate, the only candidate in the race who is a lifelong, or rather, has been a Democrat at least all of her adult life. She had a brief flirtation with Republicans when she was a teenager. But she is the only declared Democrat in this race. Bernie Sanders is a Democratic socialist who has long identified himself as an independent. So yes, it's not surprising that he does really, really well with independent voters. But New York is a closed primary. Most of the big states coming up, as you pointed out, are closed.
Speaking of New York, here is the cover of the Daily News today, slamming Sanders for supporting immunity for gun makers. Of course,
welcome to the rough and tumble world of New York media, right?
And referring, of course, to the massacre at Sandy Hook a couple of years ago.
Yep.
How is the Sanders campaign now going to deal with things like this as they face what could be, again, it's not necessarily make or break, but it is an all important.
Right. Well, so guns have kind of faded into the background in recent weeks as a big issue. You remember Hillary Clinton made it a big issue at the start of the race, pointing out that she was more progressive on gun control than Bernie Sanders is. And then, really hasn't talked about it much. But here in New York, it is a big issue. They are neighbors to Connecticut, where the Sandy Hook massacre happened. Mayor Bloomberg, who sort of spearheaded the gun control movement in this country in recent years, was mayor of New York City. So her campaign thinks that that is going to be a very important issue here in New York, and you're going to hear about it from her time and time again over the next week and a half.
What is very clear, the gloves may be officially off
Yes.
on the side of the Democrats. Nancy, we appreciate the time.
Sure thing.